Hello there, out there in YouTube land. How are you all doing today? Well, I'm glad to hear that. What? Someone over here is complaining that they're not doing too good today. Well, I can't help you out there. I just hope maybe by listening to me flap my ugly gums here, maybe I'll cheer you up a little bit. I don't know. We'll give it a try anyhow. I'd like to discuss what I used to do, or what we used to do as kids, not to get into a long, boring conversation. Some of my childhood memories, my fond childhood memories. One of the things that I missed doing, back when I was probably about 8 to 10 years old, my sister was about 2 years younger than me, we had closer family ties, and I think this applies to a lot of you people. If you think back on the days when family was closer together, and you used to visit more, spend time with family. Nowadays, you just don't do that. You may call on the phone, chat on the phone for hours and stuff like that, but it's not the same thing. There is nothing like face-to-face contacts with the family, sitting at the table, having a cup of coffee, reminiscing, having dinner together with your aunts and your uncles and your grandma and your grandfather and so on. I miss those days, and we did a lot of that back in my childhood times, as I'm sure a lot of you have too. Nowadays, it's a high-tech world. People rather call on the phone, and when you want to go and visit, oh, I'm too busy, I'm busy with the grandkids, I'm busy this and that, It's just not the same as it was back when we were kids. Back in the 1950s, of course, I was, in 1953 I was 10 years old, but I'm going to go back a little further to about 1950, 51, thereabouts, maybe 52. We used to go visiting my aunt and uncle, who was living in North Haven at the time, and we lived in the New London County at that time, so it was about 50 miles apart. And in order to go anywhere or visit or anything, my dad was in the landscaping business. And when you're in the landscaping business back in the 1950s, of course, those of you who are in it or have been in it back in those days, or remember your dads being in it back in those days, we were a very poor family, and my dad didn't have special tractors or anything. He did everything by hand, with the pickaxe, the grub axe, the sledgehammer. He did all that, and it was all by hand. So was my uncle, did the same thing. So he had a flatbed truck. That's all, a simple rack-bodied flatbed truck. And on the back of it, he had a wooden toolbox which he made. And on that toolbox, my sister and myself, when we wanted to go to my uncle's place, which we looked forward to going to, we sat on the toolbox in the back. So give us a couple blankets so we can cover up with the blankets. Back then, in the early 1950s, as I recall, and I could be wrong, I don't think there was an Interstate 95. There could have been, but if it was, I don't remember it. Because we used to take Route 1. That was the main road from Florida to Maine, is Route 1. So his vehicles, he wouldn't put them on the highway anyways, even if we had it, because he didn't trust his vehicles running at highway speeds. They needed repairs, and he kept his vehicles at a slower pace going on these back roads. So back in the 50s, you could ride in the back of a truck, and it was a lot of fun. You'd be covered up with the blankets if it's a little chilly. Of course, it was in the summertime, naturally. We wouldn't do this in the winter. And you drive down Route 1 and you can see all the sights. You could really enjoy yourself. You couldn't do that nowadays. It would be illegal. And besides that, you're liable to get shot doing it. You know, the way things are nowadays, it's pathetic. So those are fond memories. You'd ride down. It would take about an hour and a half to get to 50 miles from New London to North Haven, Connecticut. So it was a very nice trip. It was a relaxing trip. Yes, you had your red lights and your traffic, but you didn't have the traffic that you got nowadays. You know, everything was a slower pace back in the 50s. So that's what we look forward to, you know, and we ride on this toolbox. You just hold on to the racks, and we're going that fast. You ain't going to fall out of the truck or anything, nothing of that nature. And, yeah, you go bump, 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 bump. Hey, it was a lot of fun, really. Well, being that my dad was in the landscaping business, and so was my Uncle Ed, and they established their landscape business, as they told me when I was just a little kid, in 1928. And one thing that my dad and my uncle used to make, and especially my uncle, he did more of that than my dad did, because my dad was living in New London and most of the time, or Montville, or somewhere in those areas, because he moved around a lot. So my uncle was established in North Haven, so he made what we call grave blankets. And if you look it up on the internet, grave blankets were something that was established in the 1800s, back in the Civil War days. And I'll tell you how the grave blankets were made, as best as I can remember from my memory here. The grave blanket made by using laths, that rough wood, probably about maybe an inch and a half wide and about a quarter-inch thick, and they were used in the old buildings for plastering. They were very rough, and you get splinters on them and everything else. They were on the walls, and you'd buy them in bundles, and you'd nail them up on your walls, and then you'd take the plaster. This is before sheetrock, or at least wise before sheetrock became popular. And you literally, it's an art. It's a lost art that very few guys can do now. But especially on the ceilings of these old houses, you had plastered ceilings, and it was, the lats were mounted and nailed, spaced about a quarter-inch apart. So you'd take your mud or your plaster and you'd plaster over and work it in there and smooth it out. Like I say, it was a lost art. And not too many guys are doing that anymore. Everything is sheetrock now. But anyways, we'd buy those lats, and you would take and make the frames out of them. They're about 6 foot long and about 18 inches, maybe 24 inches wide. I don't recall. I think they were more like 18 inches wide. And then, I don't know if you can see this on the video or not. You'd take the thing would be rectangular, of course, about 6 foot long, 18 inches wide. You'd take chicken wire, and you'd hump it over like this, so that you'd have a long bed with chicken wire on it. And then you take the pine tree branches, small branches, probably about maybe a foot long or so. That's pine trees, of course, stay green all year, so these would be made in the winter time. So you'd stick them all into the chicken wire, fill it right up so it's totally green, and then take holly, the red holly, and stick it in there to decorate it. And then you take pine cones and paint them silver. The pine cones would be dried. Of course, they'd drop on the ground. You just pick them up from pine trees and so forth. Paint them silver, and then stick them in there to decorate it, and probably had some other decorations too. They're very memorable things.